Welcome to UO Today. I'm Steve Shankman, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. Our guest is Adell Amos, the Director of the Environmental and Natural Resources Law Program. Adell Amos earned her BA in Biology at Drury College and her JD at the University of Oregon. She practiced environmental and natural resources law for 6 years with the U.S. Department of the Interior, advising the National Park Service and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife on water rights issues. She joined the Oregon Law School faculty in 2005. Adell Amos' scholarship focuses on water resource management, the role of agencies in setting national and local water policy, and citizen participation in water rights adjudications. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So how many years you got your law degree, and then how many years were you out there working in the outside of academia?
Yeah, I spent, after graduating, I spent a year clerking for the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and that was in Reno, Nevada for Judge Proctor Hug, who was the chief judge at the time. Spent a lot of time in Reno and in San Francisco, where the Ninth Circuit is headquartered. And then from there went to Washington, D.C. in the Department of Interior's honors program for bringing in new attorneys, and spent 6 years practicing law in the solicitor's office in Washington, D.C.
In D.C., yeah. Was it pretty exciting being there in the capital of the country, dealing with the big issues?
Yeah, it was very exciting, particularly for me. I grew up in mid-Missouri, in a small little farm town, so a small town girl. So DC was a big place for me. The honors program in Interior is wonderful because you spend the first year rotating around all of the divisions within the department, and so you get to see the work of the entire department. And the Department of Interior has agencies in it from the National Park Service and the Fish and Wildlife Service to the Bureau of Reclamation and the Bureau of Land Management, the Minerals Management Service, the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So the scope of issues that I got to see my first year as a lawyer, right out of law school, freshly minted, it was pretty amazing, a pretty amazing opportunity. And then at the end of that first year, you take a permanent assignment in one of the divisions in the solicitor's office. And my permanent assignment was in the Division of Parks and Wildlife, which is the office of legal counsel for the Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Park Service. And
what drew you to that particular area?
Yeah, it was really interesting. The year that I was in the honors rotation, they advertised a job in that division working on water issues for the National Wildlife Refuge System, which is a system of lands managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for the purpose of wildlife. And they advertised a job doing water rights for that system, and I expressed some interest in that and had an interview doing it. And at the time, when I interviewed, I didn't really know what the scope of the job would be, but during my interview, attorney by the name of Pete Rayner, who ended up hiring me, asked me if I had ever heard of the Klamath Basin. And I had actually gone to law school at the University of Oregon, and in my water law class at the University of Oregon, we had used the Klamath Basin as a model for sort of studying water law in the West. And so I shared that, and I think that probably sealed the deal for me getting the job, because the first set of issues I worked on were the water rights issues for the refuges that sit in the Klamath Basin. And then from there it just grew into work with refuges throughout the West. And then it grew into work with the National Park Service as well.
And you say you grew up in
Missouri.
Missouri. And did you come to the U of O Law School in part because of its reputation in environmental issues?
My undergraduate degree, as you said, was in biology, and I'd always had an interest in environmental science and environmental issues. And I made that critical decision that so many make at the end of undergrad, whether or not to go into graduate school in science, wildlife biology was where I was headed, or into law school. Took the GRE and the LSAT and made the ultimate decision to go to law school. And so looked at the University of Oregon because of the reputation and history of its environmental law program.
So are there other law schools out there that also have that reputation in environmental law, or?
Sure, there are a host of law schools around the country that offer expertise in the environmental and natural resources law arena. It's actually an area where more and more law schools are trying to develop expertise, because the growth of environmental law has just been really huge. Go ahead.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
And so, yeah, there are several. The program out here at U of O was a ranked program at the time that I selected it, and in the last few years we've maintained that ranking. So, so yeah, but there are great schools across the country. There are only 3 public law schools that, at least this last year, made it into the top 10, and we were one of those. So. We're in good company.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good to know that.
Yeah.
So, when you were doing this work in D.C. Or before that, did you think of teaching law? How did this come about that you came back to the U of O?
Yeah, while I was in law school, I started to think about the idea of teaching at some point, being in academia, but we really wanted to get out and practice law. And so the position at the Interior Department was perfect for that because it gave me the opportunity to work on national issues in Washington, D.C. and get a lot of experience. But after 6 or so years of practice, I started to really identify areas where I would like to do some writing and some focused research. And the practice of law, at least my practice at Interior, didn't allow for that. There just wasn't time. The pace of the practice was such that there wasn't time for that kind of endeavor. So the opportunity when it came up to come back to Oregon with that 6 years experience in DC and teach and write. And then I was particularly excited about this position because of it has this dual nature of being, you're the director of the program, so there's this administrative function, capacity building, program building, which I'm very interested in, and the teaching and the writing. It ends up being quite a full load of things to do, but I like the mix.
Now, the U of O, is this the first, I guess it's called public interest environmental law clinic in the country?
Yeah, I was just asking Professor John Bonine, who's been at the U of O since the late 70s, about that. And according to him, we did start the first environmental law clinic in the country. I'm sure some of the other schools will claim that they started the first too, but based on my conversation with John, we started the first one. And clinical education is a wonderful thing because it gives students who are studying law the opportunity to actually work on real cases, see what it's like to be an attorney in a particular field. And so we started that endeavor at U of O. Our clinic ultimately.
What is a clinic? Can you let us know what of course I know what a clinic is, a medical clinic, but
right.
what does actually that mean in this context?
Yeah, it means it's outside the classroom and you work on real cases, real controversies. You meet with clients, you deal with administrative records, you are involved in discovery and filing motions with the court. Sometimes in the environmental law clinic, students argue cases in court while they're students.
I see.
So it's this opportunity.
It's real stuff.
It's
real stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, and it's this opportunity to see the practice of law while you're studying it. We also have a very robust externship program. Clinics are usually situations where it's litigation and it's practice oriented. Externships, we also offer a host of externships where students individually go into various organizations and legal offices and get to see what it's like to practice law, advise clients, deal with legal issues.
And when do you do this clinic? Is this an ongoing thing, or is it in the
yeah,
summers? Or
it's a course, so you register for it and externships like a course. So you get credit hours for the work that you do. It's just not sort of lecture and in the classroom, and there's no exam at the end.
Now, apart from this clinic, are you able to litigate cases now? Are you involved in do you have clients and so on?
Yeah, and our clinic now is actually housed in the Western Environmental Law Center, so I don't direct the work of the clinic. It's just a piece of, so I'm not involved in the litigation piece of the clinic. I sort of supervise the academic component of the clinic. But yeah, it's one of the things that I'm trying to do now that I've entered academia is to make sure I keep one foot sort of firmly planted back in the practice world. And so I am involved with several projects, water law projects in various places in the West where I'm trying to stay engaged with the current debate and then trying to do writing, my academic writing, in ways that can help address those problems, target that academic writing to something that's happening on the ground.
Now, is that true of most professors in the law school, that they are practicing as well to some
I think
extent?
a fair number sort of consult or practice or stay engaged with issues outside. I mean, because what we do is train folks to become lawyers, it is important that we stay in touch with what's happening in the bar. I have missed practice more than I anticipated. Missed the client work, the day-to-day problem solving that you do, at least in my position. You know, the phone rings at 8 in the morning and, you know, somebody's received a letter from a state water resources department and they don't know what to do with it. And I do miss that piece of practice. So I think for me, I'll always keep part of my myself in the practicing world.
Well, I kind of was curious about, you know, living in this high-pressured Washington, D.C. environment and then suddenly coming to, you know, a fairly sleepy town and the academic life. How was that transition for you?
Yeah, well, part of it's wonderful because just day-to-day living in D.C. can be very demanding. Getting to work can be a trick. And so my commute is much better now that I'm in Eugene. But I do miss, I mean, there's nothing, for me there was nothing like living in Washington, D.C., particularly if you're interested, well, any issue, but for environmental law, so much of the law comes out of the agencies and the bureaucracy that exists in D.C. So the chance to be a part of that was pretty exciting for me.
Now you can bring that back to us so that we you know, have a shot at doing some good things. Has the program changed much since you were a student?
Yeah, it's just this incredible program with this incredible history. And so when I was a student here, I was a part of where it was at that point in its history. But it's covered so much ground since I left and now have come back. One of the most significant things I think that's happened for the program is just a renewed commitment to that program in the law school, and that being one of the law school's sort of flagship programs, and really seeing our expertise that we've built up over 30 years as an asset to the law school. And in the new building, we have dedicated space for our Environmental and Natural Resources Law Center, thanks to generosity of the Bowerman family, who are very
so the Bowermans have been helpful,
absolutely,
as donors in keeping this going.
When it came time to divvy up space in the new building, they stepped up to ensure that we had space reserved. And having a space is an important thing. It sounds like a silly thing to say, but having sort of a central spot where students and faculty and visitors and alum can gather is really significant. And so the addition of the space has been really nice. And in the last couple of years, that space has just come alive. You know, students see it as a resource. Lots of meetings in there, lots of energy in our center.
The last few years have probably not been particularly good years for the environment. We just saw Al Gore's film out and presented a very dire picture of where we're at. How do the realities of the situation enter into your own teaching and thinking about law and the environment?
Yeah, it makes it, for me, a very passionate endeavor. I feel so strongly about sending problem solvers out into the world. And so training lawyers to go out there and try to tackle some of these problems is so important. And after not a lot of time in D.C., you start to realize, I tell students a lot that the government makes little decisions every day. Some of them make the news and some don't. And so to understand how that system works and to help people engage that system and figure out where decisions are being made and where the power is can be so important. And for people to pay attention to decisions that are being made and the impacts it may have. You know, I think for some people it can get daunting. You know, you watch a movie like Al Gore's and you think, you know, where's the hope in it? I'm still very hopeful.
You are.
I am very hopeful,
so you think we can turn it around?
Yeah, absolutely.
You do?
Yeah. But I'm a hopeful person.
Right.
So I believe we can. I believe we have to commit to it. And we have to bring more people on board. My sister and I talk a lot about sort of each one bringing one. Like you have everybody who believes that there's a crisis out there needs to find somebody who doesn't believe and help show them that and I think just get people out into the environment and appreciating it and you know, on a river trip and on a hike and things like that helps a lot.
Do you see that as a obviously it's a very important issue, national issue? do you see candidates coming up in the next couple of years who are really going to focus on this and give it the kind of attention it deserves at the national level?
I certainly hope that the environment rises into the level of being part of the national debate when we, as we face particularly the next presidential election. There are a lot of pressing issues for the country, though, and so you can see where attentions can be drawn in other areas. But I hope that the environment makes it on to that list, and I think that it will. I think people are concerned about the quality of their air and water and what we're preserving for future generations to enjoy. So I hope that it'll make it on that national stage when the time comes.
Yeah, well, to come back to the local stage for a moment, so the Environmental and Natural Resources Program has several projects on the moment, at the moment on current issues. Do you want to tell us about what some of these are?
Yeah.
Because you talked about water rights.
Yeah, we have 5 projects that we run out of our Environmental and Natural Resources Law Center, and they cover sort of a wide range of issues. The project I'm the most closely involved with is the Oceans, Coasts, and Watersheds project, and that project is looking at the legal systems that are involved with the management of inland watersheds and the relationship of those inland watersheds to ocean and coastal environments, and trying to sort of address those problems from the inland waters all the way out to the ocean. Like if you look at the salmon issue, it's not just an inland water problem or an ocean problem. It actually crosses that what is a sort of a legal divide. The law treats inland one way and ocean another way. So that project is designed to look at that. And then we have the Conservation Trust Project, which is looking at private market mechanisms to provide for environmental protection. The whole conservation trust movement, organizations like the Nature Conservancy and the Trust for Public Land, use sort of private market mechanisms to achieve conservation. And so that project is looking at that movement and looking at the legal mechanisms that they use.
So in other words, raising private funds in order to secure public lands.
Right. I mean, that's what many of those organizations do. They raise private money, they buy private lands, and then they put those private lands into public ownership. So it's a distinct way of approaching conservation. We have a sustainable land use project that looks at land use practices. That one's been particularly active in the last couple of years in light of Measure 37 and the debates around that in the state of Oregon. And so that project has hosted some brown bags and sort of a lecture series on Measure 37 and the impacts and the court decisions that we've had so far on that measure. And then we have the Native Environmental Sovereignty Project, which looks at co-management of resources with tribal peoples and sort of the relationship of tribal peoples with the resources and sovereignty issues for them in terms of managing those resources. And then our last of the 5 projects is the Global Environmental Democracy Project, which looks specifically at sort of citizen participation on a global scale on these environmental issues. Our program has quite a...
What does that mean exactly?
Our program has quite a collection of folks who work on the international stage and look at international environmental issues, international governance mechanisms. And for a lot of environmental issues now, climate change, global warming is one. It's really, it's sort of the only way to tackle it in some ways is to look globally at that question. And so that project tackles those sort of global issues.
Well, that's a very important issue, isn't it? Because I've been reading about genocide, for example, and some of the problems, for example, in preventing the Nazi genocide was you had this idea of national sovereignty, so you can't intervene.
Right.
And it's the same issue here. You have things that happen in various countries that affect the whole globe, and how can you tell people what they should be doing in their countries as their sovereign nations? And how do you deal with that issue? I'm asking you, how do you deal with that issue?
Well, I think, currently the mechanisms that are in place involve a lot of voluntary compliance, and the U.S. is sort of famous for sort of participating in the endeavor, but not necessarily maybe signing on to the treaty or agreeing to be bound. And those are really difficult issues. I think the question of global warming is going to push us hardest, if we really want to address that, push us hardest on what mechanisms might be available to address those issues. So,
well, those sound like 5 extraordinarily important issues. You bill your programs as interdisciplinary. Now, what does that mean exactly?
I think that the program believes, and I believe, that environmental problems are not going to be solved by one discipline. You know, the lawyers aren't going to go out and solve the environmental problems. The scientists aren't going to go out. Scientists in one discipline aren't going to go out and solve the problem. That the problems really call for interdisciplinary approaches. And so our view is that the sooner law students learn how to engage people from other disciplines, the better suited they are to be part of the solution, the better equipped they are to be part of the solution than once they leave law school and become members of the bar. And so with all of these projects, we try to take an interdisciplinary approach. So we work with other departments on campus. For example, our Sustainable Land Use Project worked closely with the 3PM department here on campus to bring in a series of speakers to talk about Measure 37. We just brought Professor Eric Feugel from the University of Illinois, and we worked with the Oregon chapter of the American Planning Association to do that. So it's just engaging those other disciplines. I'm co-teaching a water policy class this winter with an economics professor at Oregon State, Bill Yeager. And so it's just those efforts to engage across the disciplinary lines. We're also increasingly looking at concurrent and joint degree offerings, so ways that folks can get both a law degree and a degree in another discipline by adding an additional year. And so that's a way to start to look at issues across those lines.
So speaking of law school, I understand the tuition is what now, about $100,000?
Well, not tuition, but the debt that a lot of students,
They go into $100,000 of debt?
You can have students who can be
before they get their first job. And and the tuition, what's the tuition? Is it the same as, what is the tuition of the law school compared with the is it comparable to what in-state students pay for undergraduate?
Yeah, no, it's more expensive than undergrad. I think Oregon is still considered to be a very good deal in terms of tuition. So it's an affordable law school, but even at that, I think in terms of tuition, I don't know the exact number, I should know that, but in terms of tuition, you know, we're around that $20,000 mark a year for tuition. And for our environmental program, the debt burden of our graduates is particularly poignant because our program has always had a focus on and has always drawn students who are interested in public service and public interest work. And that traditionally is the work that doesn't pay as much.
So they get a big debt and then they're not going to be able to repay that debt very, very quickly.
That's right. And it creates a disincentive for taking those kinds of jobs.
So what are you going to do about that?
Yeah, no, the law school is, I think, taken some unbelievable strides in this direction. And we've initiated a loan repayment assistance program, an LRAP program, that basically helps students with their loan payments once they graduate, if they take jobs in the public interest sector, the public service sector. And that program is just critically important for our environmental grads particularly, so that people feel able to go into the public service work and that public interest work. And for our program, that's really important because many of our students have that inclination. So programs like a loan repayment assistance program are really important. And I think our alumni and our other donors sort of understand how important that is and how they can have a direct impact on someone being able to take a public service job by participating in the LRAP program.
So speaking of public service jobs or any other kind of jobs, the students who graduate from the environmental law program, what kind of jobs do they find themselves having after they've graduated?
Yeah, we have alumni. Actually, just my first year as director, we put together a list of alumni across the United States and around the world, really, who are working on environmental issues. So we have graduates in all the sectors, you know, the public interest, government, private sectors, and all around the nation working on environmental issues. A pretty good group in Washington, D.C. that I was involved with, and I was back there. And then, in Alaska and, you know, Colorado and Montana, in Oregon, California, spread around the country doing environmental work.
So you get your degree. There's a pretty good chance that you're going to find employment. Is that right? Are there people that just look for a couple of years and don't find anything in that area?
Yeah, I think sometimes there's a struggle finding the exact job you want. I really encourage students to always be, sort of have that dream job in mind, and then figure out what jobs can get you to that dream job. And there are all kinds of opportunities. The other thing that I think makes a law degree interesting is that you can get a lot of non-attorney jobs with a law degree. I mean, Washington, D.C. is filled with attorneys who aren't working as lawyers. So law as a graduate degree can open up, it can kind of broaden the possibilities, whereas some other graduate degrees, you start to get narrower and narrower in terms of what you can do.
Well, in the minute or so that we have left, we haven't really talked specifically about your own research. You want to give us a succinct sense of what you're working on? Yeah.
Well, I work primarily in the area of water law. I have a piece coming out this fall involving the federal government's use of state water laws to protect federal resources. And then I'm really interested in public, non-water right holders' participation, fishermen, recreationists, adjacent landowners who don't have water rights, their interests in protecting water resources and how the system deals with those.
Well, thank you. I wish we had more time to speak to you about your own work, but it's been really good talking with you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
We've been speaking with Adell Amos, Director of the Environmental and Natural Resources Law Program at the University of Oregon. Thanks very much for watching.